Hello, I'm Jonah with Magnanimous Media, and in this video I'll be talking about the substantial firmware updates to the Sony F55. When released, the F5 and F55 were essentially in beta firmware. Nearly all systems will receive firmware updates over their life that amount to fixing bugs and mild improvements. But the F55 updates unlock capabilities, added new features, and improved the interface. The F55 updates include new compressions, high frame rates, new gammas and color gamuts, added lookup tables and user-generated 3D lookup table support, new recording options, and substantial user interface improvements. These updates make the Sony F55 easily the most versatile camera system available, at home in episodic TV, narrative, documentary, and ENG use. In this video, I'll discuss these new features, how you'll use them, and their ideal application. One of the most recent and useful updates to the F55 are changes to the menu and external interface. For starters, the internal menu, when selected, can now be displayed on the external screen, which is especially useful if you're using a scope and don't want to adjust diopters between AC, operator, and DP. The first item in the menu is the user menu. This menu can be edited by simply selecting Edit User Menu, and is most useful for settings that either need to be quickly accessed or are conglomerated in order to hasten setup and prep. The external menu has a variety of modes, and is extremely useful for quick access to camera settings without having to navigate the menu. Camera settings is the default screen. By pressing the various buttons, you can toggle through the screens to access different settings. The default camera screen gives you access to S&Q mode, shutter, color temp, ISO or gain, gamma, or an exposure index readout and monitor lookup table. Shutter and ISO or gain modes are accessed in the camera menu. Press the camera button again and you have access to color bars, auto white balance, auto black balance, as well as monitor LUT and display output settings for sub and HDMI, as well as the viewfinder. Monitor LUTs are only available in Cine Exposure Index shooting mode, and the main SDI outputs will always reflect whatever gamma is being recorded. The File External menu pertains to scene files for camera settings, user menu items for customizable user menu, user gamma, lens file, and 3D lookup tables. These settings can be stored and loaded from an SD card, from the File menu, or through the File External interface. The AUTC menu gives you access to audio and timecode settings. The most useful thing here is being able to access and adjust audio input levels with the menu dial while previewing the levels in dB on the external menu. Pressing the AUTC button again allows you to change monitor channels and monitor level for the 3.5mm jack. Pressing AUTC again gives you access to timecode settings. The View menu is associated with playback. If internally recording to S/S cards, you will first want to toggle to the thumbnail screen. By pressing thumbnail, you can view the clips and navigate to a specific shot. Once on the shot, press the View button again and press play or pause. Using the Wi-Fi module for remote control of the camera now has expanded support for iOS devices and Safari. Under the Wi-Fi menu, you can access the camera over Wi-Fi and use the information set in the basic authentication menu to access the camera. In the Wi-Fi interface, you have start-stop control and can activate any of the assigned buttons, navigate the menu, control playback, output color bars and adjust S&Q settings, shutter, color temp, sensitivity, and gamma. Firmware version 1.2 added SR codec for HD recording at up to 29.97 progressive. SR is internally recorded to S/S cards in 10-bit depth at HD resolution and comes in 3 flavors: 422 Lite at 220 megabits per second, 422 SQ at 440 megabits per second, and 444 SQ at 440 megabits per second. The SR codecs, especially 444, are most useful for situations where color sampling is imperative, most notably for compositing with green or blue screens. When debayering to HD, the F55 is able to give a true edge, which means that chroma accuracy is optimal. When recorded to RGB color space, the footage will be optimized for chroma keying. SR444 will be at home in high-end studio shoots and episodic TV. SR422 and 422 Lite are activated in YP-BPR mode. These are good codecs for matching to systems using ProRes and DNx HD and are useful for episodic TV, documentary, and ENG use. Now onto one of the more popular updates to the F55, expanded support for slow and high frame rates. Limited HFR support came with version 2.0, but are now fully functional with version 4.0. In S&Q, you can record 4K RAW at 1 to 60 frames per second, 2K RAW at 1 to 240 frames per second, 4K and Quad HD XAVC at 1 to 60 frames per second internally, 2K and HD XAVC at 1 to 180 frames per second internally. Undercranking and overcranking have many uses in narrative, episodic, documentary, and ENG projects. 240 frames per second will give you fairly dramatic high-speed footage, though it is not fast enough for bullet time style footage. Cache record is another notable feature in version 4. Cache record allows the camera to pre-roll a preset time before the start-stop button is triggered. Cache record is most useful in non-fiction situations where you wish to lighten the editing load and/or conserve media, but have an unpredictable subject. Cache recording can be used with XAVC 4K with a max of 2 seconds at 23.98, XAVC HD with a max of 8 seconds at 23.98, and MPEG HD with a max of 15 seconds at 23.98. Center crop is a new function that allows you to crop the Super 35mm sensor to a Super 16 imaging area. This mode is only available in 2K resolution. The intended use of this function is to allow shooters to use lenses with smaller coverage, such as 16mm lenses or any ENG lenses designed for the 2/3 inch chip. Center crop performs well, but you won't achieve the quality of scan that you do using the full sensor. Early in the firmware updates, the F55 had the potential to output 4K. Using the main and sub outputs, the F55 would output 10-bit 422 in HD quadrants, giving you 4K when combined. This output is useful for recording to systems like the KeyPro Quad, as well as monitoring with compatible professional 4K monitors or dual-link 4K converters. With firmware version 4, the F55 can now output 4K and Quad HD from the HDMI output. This output is 8-bit 420, so it is a substandard output for 4K recording, but will be useful as a reference with 4K televisions. Another addition of note is S-Gamut 3 and S-Log 3. S-Log 2 was an adaptation of S-Log and designed for 14 stops of dynamic range. However, S-Log 2 compresses more information in the shadows and was generally different than most log workflows. S-Log 3 is a log gamma designed to fit more into P3 DCI workflows that colorists are familiar with, such as Log C from ARRI and C-Log from Canon. Some standard monitor LUTs were slowly added through various updates to the F55. Now, Sony RAW Viewer can be used to create custom 3D lookup tables that can load directly into the camera. Sony RAW Viewer can be used to generate 1D and 3D LUTs. When creating a LUT, note that the camera will need to be set to the same color space and gamma as the one that you graded in to properly display the LUT. ISO, color temperature, and tint will not be baked into the LUT. If generating a 1D LUT, use curves to manipulate contrast and color, then go to the parameter control and save the camera LUT for the F55. On the SD card, use the file path private, Sony, Pro, Camera, PMW-F55_F5. With 3D LUTs, you can use the hue offset wheels. When saving the LUT, select Post 3D LUT, which will save it as a .cube for use in a number of color grading programs or nonlinear editing plugins to apply the LUT to log footage. The ability to load .cube files for 3D LUTs opens up workflow opportunities and a world of versatility for the F55. Any program that can build and export .cube files can be used with the F55, such as DaVinci Resolve. In Resolve, you simply apply your grade, then right-click on the graded clip and export the .cube. Once you've loaded the 3D LUT into an appropriate SD card file structure, you simply go into the Load menu and load the MLUT into one of the available MLUT slots and apply the MLUT through the User LUT menu. Sony is still promising more updates to the F55, but the firmware to date represents a massive improvement in functionality and versatility. So if you weren't looking at the F55 for your next project, you can add it to the list now. For more news and tutorials, check us out at magnanimous.biz.